As usual, we speak on something in the Parsha, basically based on the Rebbe's Sichos, and then we try to learn it for ourselves. Exodus, learning for ourselves, is called Adaita de Nafshe. Adaita de Nafshe means to understand it not just because it says so in the book. We want Mashiach because it says so in the book. That's not learning. That's repeating what it says. Adaita de Nafshe means that there is something in my mind, in my soul, and in my insight, personal, that says, that's Mashiach, I really want it. This means Adaita de Nafshe. Everything in the Torah, everything that we learn, ultimately has an element that can apply and we can draw a directives and insight for ourselves. And the interesting thing in today's Parsha, which Rebbe points out, the words, and there's an expression in today's Parsha that says, "V'halachto bidrochov," which means "V'halachto bidrochov," that you should serve Hashem. "V'halachto bidrochov," and you should walk in His ways. And how is that? "V'halachto bidrochov," what does that imply? How do you walk? What does it mean, walk in His ways? It means that you should essentially follow and do those things that Hashem does, His ways. The Gemara says, such as, Mahu Rachum, just as He is a Rachum, He has mercy, Afato Hayei Rachum, you too should have mercy. And so forth, all other qualities that are associated with Hashem, you should, so to speak, acclimate, you should claim to yourself and develop it for yourself. So that's fine and good, and this is mentioned many times. They should follow in the ways of Hashem. Yet, this is the only place where this expression, "V'halachta bidrochov," is counted as one of the 613 mitzvahs. For those of you who are not familiar with this concept, I want to briefly explain to you. There are many, many things in the Torah that are either directives that teach us how to act, how to think, how to feel, tells us about the truth, and so forth. But the principle, the core of the Torah that pertains to us on a practical level is called a mitzvah. A mitzvah means a commandment. Essentially, everything from the beginning of the Torah until Matan Torah in the Torah, which is the whole Chumash of Bereishis, and a few Pashas and Shmois, are all before Matan Torah, and there are hardly any mitzvahs there. Even though we learn a lot of things, a lot of proper behavior from those relations. How Yankiv Avinu dealt with Lavan, for instance. Rambam describes how Yankiv dealt with Lavan. Lavan, that Yankiv Avinu worked for Lavan, and describes him there that he worked for him day and night, full honesty. And the Rambam says this is how we have to. Also, when a person is hired and is being entrusted with somebody else's wealth, he has to carry this responsibility to all ends. This is responsibility. And all kinds of other things that we learn from the Oveis, from the stories that the Torah tells us about the Oveis, and all other things. Yeah, these are not called mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are direct statements of Hashem, do this or don't do this. And we know they have, so to speak, a tradition. They have a Kabbalah from Moshe Rabbeinu, and more ones around, that there are altogether 613 mitzvahs. Many mitzvahs are repeated in the Torah several times. Like, for instance, you should keep Shabbos. It's repeated in Torah, but it's not each time that it's repeated, it's another mitzvah. There are reasons why it repeats it. They learn something else from it. But a mitzvah, this is a direct command of do's and don'ts. The Rambam, before he wrote the big Sefer of the Rambam, everybody knows the Rambam, the Sefer of Rambam, which includes really the entire Torah, Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebe'al-Peh and everything. This is sort of the first Shulchan Aruch. The Rambam gives straight halachas how you should do a mitzvahs and so forth. So before he wrote this Sefer, the Rambam wrote a Sefer called Sefer HaMitzvahs. The Sefer HaMitzvahs, where he enumerates all the 630 mitzvahs and also provides a brief explanation of each mitzvah. It's called Sefer HaMitzvahs. It's a very rich Sefer. And before he wrote the Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Rambam wrote a Hakdama to Sefer HaMitzvahs. What is Hakdama? An introduction. And this Hakdama, the Rambam describes the rules, the principles that we use to identify what is a mitzvah, which thing is a mitzvah. Like we said, there are certain things that the Torah says which are things that we have to learn from and so forth, but it's not, doesn't go into the count of mitzvahs. Doesn't go into this a special category calling a mitzvah. This is a very special category. And in this first Sefer, the Akdama, the Rambam gives klolim. This is a very profound, very rich Sefer. Many commentaries after the Rambam, even the Ramban, all this discuss these very klolim, because this actually presents a very clear approach how to identify mitzvahs. And one of the klolim that the Rambam says that identify a mitzvah, the Rambam says that a mitzvah has to be very specific. Anything to be counted a mitzvah has to be very specific. Do this specific thing or don't do this specific thing. Be kind, be good. What does that mean? It means a whole bunch of things. It means a lot of different things. This is called mitzvah shebiklolus. The klolus means that encompasses a broad spectrum, a lot of things. Anything that encompasses a lot of things that can be drawn, a lot of practical things, is not considered a mitzvah per se, because from this mitzvah you don't have a specific directive what to do. This is why this is excluded from the count of mitzvahs. It's not excluded from the directive that we should learn from it and so forth, but it's not one of the 630 mitzvahs. It's very important to understand in the Torah Bichlal. I just want, as an aside, I want to explain a very important principle. You learned that there are mitzvahs min ha-Torah, there are mitzvahs min ha-Rabbanon. Anybody heard that? Anybody know what that means? Yes? Mitzvahs min ha-Torah means that these are mitzvahs which are straight from the Kol Midiraisa. There's a one level of obligation. And then there are mitzvahs that the Chachomim have instituted. Although we really are obligated to keep all the mitzvahs, the Raisa or Midrabanan, nevertheless, it is necessary, it's important for us to know the difference, that they're not the same. This importance is for many reasons. One most important reason is because the Torah says that you're not allowed to add to the mitzvahs of the Torah. Leactures, not allowed to add mitzvahs. So how can you have additional mitzvahs? So we have to understand that to add a mitzvah, this what the Torah prohibits adding a mitzvah, means that the Torah prohibits adding a mitzvah and saying that this mitzvah is on par, is the same mitzvah like keeping Shabbos or putting on tefillin. It's min Torah. That's not permitted. But if Chachamim enact a mitzvah for a given reason, like the Chachamim said, you should read the Megillah on Purim. It's a mitzvah from the Chachamim. And the Chachamim said the reason you should read the Megillah is that you should remember the nisim that Hashem did. Now, to remember the nisim that Hashem did, to remember all the good things that Hashem did, this is a mitzvah in the Torah. The Torah says that we should remember Zocher, we should also not forget that Hashem did for you. Certain occurrences in our history, the Chachamim felt necessary that we should make an emphasis on it. Like Hanukkah, we like candles. These are all mitzvahs. These are mitzvahs midrabanan. But we have to understand that these are mitzvahs that are actually related to another mitzvah in the Torah. They're not independent mitzvahs in addition to the Torah. It's very important to understand that. And the practical ramifications also, the difference, it's quite different. A person makes a mistake in a mitzvah derabanan or a mitzvah deraisa. Particularly if he's not sure about mitzvah derabanan or sofik and doubt. Okay. So the union of counting the mitzvahs, knowing which is a mitzvah and which is another directive in a general sense, but not a mitzvah, is very important. This is a very principle in the Torah. So the Rambam gives this ruling that mitzvahs should be close. Mitzvahs that encompass many different phases, many different aspects of a person's activities, is not considered a mitzvah per se. It's a directive. Yet, the Rambam, on this passion, the words v'halachta b'drachov, the Rambam calls this a mitzvah. He says this is one of the 613 mitzvahs. And our Rebbe is asking, this is a very broad mitzvah. V'halachta b'drachov, you should go in his ways, which encompasses many, many things. You should be kind and good and considerate and you should be merciful and so forth. So how is it that here the Rambam himself seems to deviate? Deviate? Everybody knows what deviate means? Move away, turn away from his own ruling. And he said that mitzvah should be close. It's not to be counted one of the 613 mitzvahs. And the Rebbe explains, and this is what I want to really discuss. The Rebbe explains it very deeply. It says that this mitzvah should be close. This general mitzvah has something very specific in itself. This expression has something very specific that is unique to this pasuk, and because of this specificity, this is why it allows it to be included as part of the 613 mitzvahs. And what is this specific thing? The specific thing is the principle, as the Torah says, v'halachta b'dracha, v'halachta. We should walk in his ways. there are instances in the Torah where the Torah says, Shmoyer is mitzvahs of Shmoyer v'shamayto, you should watch them, keep the Torah, and you should listen and not forget and so forth. This does not add anything, does not have anything specific. You should keep all the mitzvahs. This is repeated many times. But the halachta b'drachav is a very specific instruction that not only should he keep his mitzvahs and follow in his ways, but the halachta walking has a very specific implication, very specific meaning. And in Yiddishkeit, in the Torah, halicha has a very deep instruction, very deep message. And this is why it makes it a mitzvah. What is the special mitzvah message in halicha, in walking? This is explained in Chassidus in a very broad way, that essentially a person can be learning and davening and doing all the mitzvahs and doing all that he has to do, and essentially be standing still in one place, not moving off the dime, not moving away from where he is. And here the Torah gives us instruction that it's not enough just to follow and repeat what you did yesterday, but there has to be the element of halicha, of movement. Now, everyone knows that if you read a certain portion and you learn a certain pasha once, then you learn a second time. If you learn a second time, you now know it better than you learned it the first time. When you learn it the third time, you increase in its knowledge again. There's no such thing as repeating without increase, without effect. Everything that a person repeats, a person puts on feeling once, and then puts on feeling the second time, he is much more familiar with it, feels more comfortable with it. So this is a natural thing. You don't need to be told you should walk, you should more move and grow, because growth is a natural thing in life. Growth is a natural thing in life. When you learn something and then you repeat it again, then you're bound, unless you're doing it completely superficially, you're bound to learn something more and to understand it better. What then is meant by saying that there is a special mitzvah that a person should be what's called in Chassidus a mahalech, a mover, not standing still. So as I mentioned, this has a very broad implication, and I'll try to encapsulate it as much as possible so we have at least the principles of it. The explanation of it and the whole idea is based on a posuk in Tanakh. There's a posuk in Tanakh. You know the posuk in the Tanakh?
Both.
Both? Okay, good. Tell me, what's the posuk?
I don't remember the words. It's about the malachim, right? At the end, and you should be a mahalech.
Right. Let's give you a little bit of a place, so to speak, a place. No, this was during the destruction, during the exile, the first exile, during the exile in Babel, and then there was they were preparing to build the second Beis Hamikdash. It was already nearing the time that we will build the second Beis Hamikdash. So there needed to be preparation for it, just like we're preparing now for Mashiach, right? It was a completely different time and different kind of preparation. So there was a Kohen Gadol. The one who was chosen to be Kohen Gadol, Yeshua. So the Malach said to Yeshua, Kohen Gadol, and he said various things that he should keep pure and clean and high, and he said, if you maintain this regimen and if you follow this way, then Yeshua was then amongst Malachim, and he said, I will give you the ability to be a Mahalech amongst these stationary Ha'imdim. From this pasuk implies that Malachim are called Oimdim. Oimdim means they're stationary, whereas human beings are called Mahalchim, are called movers. Now, Malachim are not stationary at all. I mean, we don't know what a Malach is. None of us saw a Malach. But what the Torah tells us, we learn about Malachim. Eliyahu never comes to every bris. Malach a bris. He comes to every bris. He couldn't stay stationary and be at every bris. He has to come to the bris. Right? He's moving around. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, really, Malachim, we not claim to understand Malachim to be able to actually perceive and project what a Malach is. But a little bit, we learn enough, we know what Mashamis is, we know that a Malach has a Neshama. It's a different kind of Neshama of a Malach. And a Malach, we know, Malachim are holy. Malachim are Gdoshim. They are holy because they actually perceive and they understand, they know Hashem. You know that in the Akedah, for instance, Akedah, that's when Avraham Avinu brought Yitzchak on the altar. He say it every day in the morning. So there's a Malach speaking to Hashem. Yikra Malach Hashem and Avraham, right? Yikra Elo Malach Hashem twice. It says, Vayikra Elo Malach Hashem.
He does it every day?
That's what we say every day, right? And the Malach in the Akedah expresses himself that I'm speaking in the name of Hashem. So a Malach speaks in the name of Hashem.
Every day.
Every day. We say this every day in davening. So a Malach is not stationary. He doesn't know what's going on. He knows a lot what's going on. And you learned already in the Chumash, Malachim came to Sarah and they told her about the birth of Yitzchak and so forth, all kinds of different things that we encountered in the Torah about Malachim. So what does it mean to say, what do you mean to say that Malachim are stationary? They don't move off. So we explained it one time, I think also in this setting. Explained it that being stationary does not mean that you don't grow in your understanding and in your vision and projection of things. Being stationary means that you don't move away from the base where you started from. This is the important principle. You don't move away from the base where you started from. Everything that you accumulate, every step up, is based on on the basis of what you have known before. I mentioned an interesting story, I think I mentioned it here, but here also that's not, Baruch Hashem, everybody changes. Maybe the walls heard it. There's a story with Rabbi Maharash when he was a child. You know the story, right?
You told us a few times.
I told you a few times. The reason I told you a few times is because it's a very important thing to understand. So the Rabbi Maharash, for those who don't remember, if they remember, maybe it'll refresh them and give them better insight in this. The Rabbi Maharash was a child, and a very lively child, very active. He wasn't stationary. He was very a lebendige child. And he was playing with his friends in the courtyard of the Rebbe, of his father, who was a Tzemach Tzedek, who was a father, who was the Rebbe at the time. The Rebbe Maharash was the youngest of many children. He was like born at an advanced stage from Tzemach Tzedek. His brother, the Rebbe Maharash's brother, was his teacher. It was a big age gap. Rebbe Maharash was a very fröhlich and joyous child. And he played with his friends in the courtyard. So one time they were playing in the courtyard and they challenged each other. There was a ladder. And what a ladder is? A ladder with rungs standing against the wall. And they challenged each other who can climb up the ladder further. You all know that the boys climb up and then get scared and come down. They were standing in line, everyone climbed up. This was a challenge, who will go further up? And, one boy went up this far, then he came down. I want to get a little further, a little less. None of them made it all to the top. Then came the Rebbe Maharash's turn. He went up to the top and came down. He was the only one from the whole group that made it to the top. So then, and the Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, his father was observing this whole scene, this whole play. So he asked him afterwards, he says, how come your friends, they didn't make it to the top and you made it to the top? Now I want to preamble this. I'm certain that the Tzemach Tzedek asked the Rebbe this question not in order to make him proud, but in order to make him aware and think what makes him different than the other boys. What in fact was different in his experience? The Rebbe asked him, why? How come the other boys didn't go up and you went up? So the Rebbe said to him, because the other boys, as they were climbing up, they would look back down to see the ground, where, how far are they from the ground. And the nature is that if you look down and you see the ground a little far away, your head begins to spin. And you can't take it, you have to come down. You get scared. The Rebbe said, I didn't look back. I just went up straight. So I was able to go all the way up. That was the Rebbe's answer. What's entailed in this answer? What is the answer? Because this answer itself begs a question. What is the question? How come you were able to do this and the other boy didn't? Why did they look back and you didn't look back?
And we looked back and then went and we saw and they saw it wasn't far, so they had it.
It's natural. If you look back, you get scared. Unless you're very used to it, you get scared from height. How come it took a man, a neshama, a soul, a power, and a personality like the Rebbe, not to look back? Whereas all his friends, who were also good kids, from his own cheder, and they looked back. Now, it is left up for us to understand what is the difference. The difference is, the other kids, and the ladder was standing on the ground, and they start walking from the ground. They start walking from the ground, so then the solid place where you begin, the base, is the ground. As you're walking up the ladder, you become further and further away from the base, from the source, from the solid base, down. I'm middle of the air, I'm middle of nowhere. So you're bound to look back and see, is the earth still there? And do I still have the base underneath me? I don't see it, I don't feel it, I'm in the middle of the air. And this is why the boy goes, every boy, I can guarantee you, everybody knows this. This principle every boy knows, but you don't look back. And everybody, before they started walking up that ladder, had resolved, I am not going to look back. And this one held up for 5 rungs, this one held up for 7 rungs, but ultimately he glanced back. And once he glanced back, he's finished. Why? Because he is bound to his base. He's bound to his base, and this is why he has to look back and see where is the base still, is the earth still there? I cannot be in the middle of the air. The Rebbe, as a child, he was a child. But nevertheless, by him, the earth wasn't his base. What was his base? Hashem. I am wherever Hashem is, that's where I am. The earth is not what's holding me up. What's holding you up, Ayim? The Rebbe. So when he walks up this ladder, his base walks with him. It's not the earth. He was not compelled at all to look back. This is why he was able to walk, go, and completely forget the base. To walk up to a height where you can relate, so to speak, to the base, because it's too far, and it didn't bother him, because he has his base over there. The Rebbe explains, in this Sikha, the Rebbe doesn't mention the story from the Marash, but the Rebbe explains that one is the principle, that you should go in his ways and Hashem's ways, and we said, he is Rachum, he is kind, you should be kind, he'll be merciful, and so forth. There are 2 things in every mitzvah. There are 2 elements, 2 principles. One is the principle of the mitzvah itself, to be kind, to be good, to be truthful, to be honest. This is the mitzvah unto itself. Then there's another important element in the mitzvah. To be kind because Hashem is kind. To be truthful because Hashem is truthful. This is a completely different concept. This means that the principle of the mitzvah is to relate to the Meibesh, to relate to Hashem. Not just to do a good thing, but to approximate. Approximate means to essentially follow and imitate the Meibesh himself. Because I live in Hashem's world, we all live in Hashem's world, and Hashem's world represents the greatness and the beauty and the purity and the goodness and the kindness of its maker, of the Meibesh. And therefore we behave according to the Creator, according to the Meibesh. So our duty here is not just to be good because I am a good person, or that this is a good thing to do. But there's another principle in this mitzvah, that you should be doing these things because the Rachov, these are His ways. That through these mitzvahs you become associated and connected and bound up with Him. This is another notch, another angle, so to speak, to every mitzvah. We once mentioned over here, maybe more than once, that it is important for us to understand when we learn Torah, the Gemara says, Kol hakoyre v'shein HaKadosh Baruch Hu koyre v'shein HaKnektor. When we learn Torah, this is Hashem's Torah. We try to understand it, and we have to try to understand it with our seichel. But we also have to understand that the more important element, the important principle in this is that we are actually receiving the Torah from the Meibashim right now as we are learning it. This is not an old thing that we have to be obligated to learn. But Hashem is learning with us right now. This principle is also in today's Parsha. Hayoim Hazeh, you learn the Parsha. Hayoim Hazeh, Hashem Harimicha Hayoim, and Rashi says, B'chol Yoim Yiyeh B'nech Chadosh, that you have to relate to the Torah that this day, this is when you first received it. This is when you first received it. This is brand new. What is the principle? This is brand new. How can it be brand new? I had it yesterday. So how can it be brand new? So this is the meshul, this is the story from Rebbe Maharash. You bring up the ladder, and the ladder is standing on the ground. Are you going up on the ladder that's standing on the ground, or are you going up the ladder that's holding you up in mid-air? Because the Rebbe is holding you on the ground, they're holding you on the third rung, and on the sixth rung, and on the 20th rung. The same Rebbeinu Shalom. Except you're going up. So this is the pshat. Yeah, the Rebbe Hashem gave us the Torah 3,000 years ago. But Hashem is still giving us a Torah. The Torah is as fresh as a new. Why? Because it's drachov. We receive it from Him every day. When we have, this is what this mitzvah is saying. This mitzvah is saying, you have to do every mitzvah not just because of the
Standing behind it.
Okay. See, that's the risk of being here.
Yeah. That's what I said.
That's good. To do a good thing, yes, you can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and you become accustomed to it, and that's about it. Even if you don't get tired of it, but there's no such thing as growth and change. Move away, move to a new perspective, to a new level. But if you recognize that the mitzvahs, and you're doing them because they're Hashem's mitzvahs, so that every mitzvah connected to Hashem, every mitzvah is a new element that you're getting by your connection to Hashem. Then, every time that you do a mitzvah, you're actually moving away from where you are to a new place. Even as we have in this simple illustration of the story with the Rebbe Maharash. It's very simple, right? We're walking up the ladder. But it makes such a tremendous difference. Whether you recognize that you're walking up the ladder, wherever you're walking, you're actually basing your thing on the principle that Hashem is with you, or on the principle that the ladder is standing on the ground. So you can go up, but you're still bound up with the ground. You can't break away from that. This is called Mahalach. Now, to bring this principle, to translate this to us, when we are here in the yeshiva, there are many reasons, and there are many paths by which a person comes to Yiddishkeit, from, so to speak, from the outside world. I have met all kinds of people. I'm sure you know yourselves and all kinds of different people. I remember meeting somebody who said, I became religious because I was invited to a Friday night meal, and I liked the Friday night meal so much. It was so warm and so friendly. I never experienced anything like this. So I decided I want to duplicate. I want to have this kind of life. I want to have this kind of life. Okay. I want to have this kind of life. But you should know that Friday night means that you have to keep Shabbos. You know what keeping Shabbos means? What is it? It means you can't have a handkerchief in your pocket. What? What's that about? How can I be without a handkerchief? It means you can't put on the light. Wait a second. What about air conditioner? Can I put on the air conditioner? No, sir. You can't do that either. Well, that the way it changes, you know. It makes it's a completely different thing. Didn't expect that. You have to understand, Yiddishkeit is a God-given Torah. The base, the ladder that the Rebbe Malash was working up, was standing on the ground. It's not standing on the ground at all. It's being held up by the Meibush, by Hashem. Yes, you have to go slow, one step at a time. But if you insist that the base is the ground, that's your original experience, and that's it, you're not going to be moving. Because you're basing it on your own perception, on your own understanding, your own likes, your own preferences, your own choices. This is what this mitzvah is saying. You have to understand the first thing, one big important principle in Torah and Yiddishkeit. That Torah and Yiddishkeit, the mitzvahs represent Hashem's mitzvahs. So that through a mitzvah we have to get used to and think and understand that we connect to Hashem. Once we recognize this principle, then that puts us, excuse me?
On a high level.
It puts us on the path towards growth, real growth. A high level that depends on every person, depends what our capacity is, but a real growth. Even the steps on the ladder depends. Some people take giant steps, some people take teeny steps. Do you ever see children play with tag? Then you're allowed to make a step, a giant step, a big step, a small step. It's a step. Excuse me?
No,
That's what it's called, hopscotch?
Mother may cross your golden roof.
What?
Mother may cross your golden roof, or
Yeah.
you have the color white.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Memories.
Oh, you remember that, okay. So the size of the step is immaterial. Some people can take bigger steps, some people take smaller steps. But it's important to know, when you take a step, you are taking a step away from your base. It's no longer based on what I understood yesterday. You have to understand it afresh now, today, because you're receiving it from Hashem today. And now becomes a completely new challenge. Wait a second, it made sense to me yesterday. But yesterday you were in a different place and it made sense to you because you were looking from the outside. But now, on the inside, you should know that there are many things associated with Shabbos. Shabbos is a whole different way of life. Shabbos is a holy day. You're not even allowed to cook. You mean you're not allowed to put up some hot water for coffee? No, you can't do that. What if it rains? Can't I carry an umbrella? Sorry. That changes the whole perspective. It changes the whole perspective. From the world outside, you look like an idiot. What are you doing? It's the water is coming down in buckets, and you're walking. Take an umbrella. That's a big deal. Taking an umbrella is more effort than walking in the rain and getting soaked. You're in a different world. You're in Hashem's world. Recognizing this principle, this makes you a mahalach. And it gives you the ability, and not only gives the ability, this is what Torah and mitzvahs are. This is one of the mitzvahs in the Torah. To be a mahalach, to grow on a constant basis, not just growing upwards, become bigger, but growing out of your limits and going into a new era. And then the next day, doing that same thing again in the next step. This is one of the big differences in general between a human being and lahavdu, an animal. An animal does things repetitively. It starts doing things instinctively. No matter how many times it does it, it's the same thing. It's an instinct. A human being, every time he does something, every time, it's a decision. He understands what he's doing. It's a mental, it's an intellectual decision. Nothing happens automatically. That's called growth. When you move away from one stage and get to another stage. And this is the mitzvah in the Torah. V'halachta b'dorochav. When you learn Torah, you do mitzvahs, you have to remember. This is not mitzvahs because they're good, they're kind, they're nice, they're human. I like this, I like the atmosphere. This is all very nice, it's all nice. This is the reward of it. But the real thing is that you're stepping into Hashem's world. This is what Torah is about. And as you're learning Torah, you're bound, no question about it, you're bound to learn in Torah things that don't make sense to you. You're bound to learn things in Torah that your mind would say, hey, this is not good. This is not right. On the basis of your set of judgments, set of principles with which you came, you say, I don't understand it. This is not right. This is not right. This is why it's important to understand that this principle. It is impossible to move in Torah and to grow and to fully comprehend and appreciate Torah if we're doing it on the basis of our human value system. As a human being, I like a nice family gathering, and everybody sings songs, everybody's friendly with each other. This is human. That cannot be the basis for your Yiddishkeit. Basis for Yiddishkeit is that you recognize a higher thing. You recognize that you are serving Hashem, you're doing Hashem's thing. This puts you on path for real growth. And then you can go up the ladder and never stop. Every time you have to make a step, you make a step. And every time you make a step, you are essentially making a decision to break away and dissociate from the limits that you were associated, that you recognized before. That's a real decision. This is a real growth. This is the real human being. This is the real human being. This is how it's possible for us to come out of the yeshiva after having learning the yeshiva a year, 2 or 3 years, which is not an enormous amount of time, going out into the world, back into the world where I came from, and not get lost there, and following the path of Torah.
If someone starts to like when during the day like do one specific mitzvah and think I'm doing this for Hashem, right?
Not for Hashem. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it because this is Hashem's ways.
We're doing it for ourselves.
You're doing it because I have to do it.
Okay, so
But what is the mitzvah entail? What is the mitzvah about? It is, and this is the mitzvah is the same thing that Hashem does.
like for tefillin, for example, you're doing it because Hashem does it, and you're doing it for yourself.
That's right.
So that's like breaking away from the previous level. Let's say, let's say you do it by rote, and then you have this in mind. So what would be a level after that? So you keep advancing. So what would be like another level? Is there like?
No. No, 1 second. No, I hear what you're saying. This is the principle of Torah. This distinguishes what you just described is distinguishes. What distinguish means? Separates between the mitzvahs that our fathers did before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah. For Matan Torah, we also did mitzvahs. The mitzvahs because that's the way their seichel directed them, understood it. After Matan Torah, we're doing mitzvahs because this is Hashem's mitzvahs. It's a categorical difference. That provides for an indefinite. This doesn't change. This principle doesn't change. But this itself provides unlimited growth. Because Hashem is unlimited. And therefore to be bound and relate to Hashem is limitless. You can relate to Hashem at one level, and then a higher level, and then a still higher level, and it never ends, unlimited. Okay, that's the answer to your question. If you want to understand what are the various levels that you can reach, that's not in the purview, in the context of this discussion. This is the principle of Halakha D'Gracha. Mitzvah, you learn to see this, and sometimes we'll discuss it. Yes. All right, gentlemen, we are going now into Rosh Hashanah, Mitzvah Hashem, a new year. By a new year, the Alter Rebbe explains, and actually, we learned in the Tanya, Anereshus Hashanah Adach Rishonah, I don't know if you said the Tanya yet, that a new year brings a new gilui, a new level of godness into the world. And we should know how the fish that come to the shore and they do their thing, and then they have to catch the wave. We should all jump onto the bandwagon with the new wave, with the new light of the new year. Maybe shall happen. Each one of us should grow at our own pace, but main thing is not to be imprisoned, not to be held back. That's the main thing. At what pace we grow, that depends on every individual. But to be held back, that means that we are held back, like we are going back to Mitzrayim. Remember, Hatzlacha, a good year. We'll still probably meet next week. I don't know. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So.